dozens of spiritual disciplines, like literally. And women and men of faith have used these throughout the ages to be able to try to stay connected to God. This morning I want to give you two that I consider to be the greatest spiritual disciplines to serve as that rope that we need in the 21st century. These have the capacity to revolutionize our lives. They have the capacity to alter our lives for good. But before I tell you what these are, I want to give you this warning. I don't want you to view these as just another thing to add to our to-do list, right? These aren't supposed to burden us. These are supposed to function more as a want to than as a have to. A want to versus a have to. So the number one, and probably the more familiar to many of you, is the discipline of Sabbath keeping. Sabbath keeping. Now I know that the word Sabbath sounds awfully churchy, and we say church has changed at River City. And so if you've got questions, that's understandable. And I want to try and address some of those questions specifically about Sabbath. The word Sabbath, where does it come from? It comes from a Hebrew word that means to rest, to stop working. It refers to doing nothing related to work for a 24-hour period of time, at least once every 7 days. 1 day in 7 where you don't have to work. Next question, where does the word come from? Well, really, Sabbath comes from the very beginning. Right after God created the universe and everything in it, we read this in Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 and 3, the very first book of the Bible. By the seventh day, God had finished the work that he had been doing, so on the seventh day he rested from all his work. And God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Now, if you're following along closely, you don't see the word Sabbath in those verses. But that verb that's translated twice in those verses as rested is the origin of the word Sabbath. The word rest is the origin of the word Sabbath, and it's used twice here. Next question. All right, so God rested after creating all things. How does that relate to me in the 21st century? God rested. What does that do for me? C.S. Lewis wrote a series of children's books called The Chronicles of Narnia. And they've been translated into more than 26 languages. More than 100 million copies have sold. This is like the Harry Potter of the 50s, 60s, 70s, up until present. 5 years ago, Disney spent $150 million to turn The Chronicles of Narnia into a movie. How many of you watched the movie or have read the books? All right, so 85% of you. 85% of you are familiar with this. Well, at the heart of Narnia's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is the abolition of Christmas, the canceling of Christmas by the White Witch. All of Narnia is under her spell or her curse. It's always winter and it's never Christmas. Now kids, imagine you never got summer vacation. It was only one season year-round. In fact, if you read the books, it's like 100 years this happens. Always winter, that's bad enough, and then never Christmas, all right? For many of us, Christmas is, especially if you're a kid, Christmas is the highlight of winter, right? It's always winter and never Christmas. That would be awful. Well, that's the best image that I can give you for what life was like for the Israelites when they were living in Egypt. They were in Egypt for 400 years. And the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, has this brilliant idea. Okay, these foreigners are living in my country and I want to build these pyramids. Free labor. So the slaves of Israel are put to work building pyramids for the Pharaoh. And they work literally 7 days a week and never a day off. All year long. 7 days a week, never a day off, all year long. The Pharaoh, in effect, has turned the Israelites into like doing machines. Machines. Not the way that they or we were created to live. So soon after God delivers the Israelites out of their slavery in Egypt, God affirms, listen, you're not doing machines. You're human beings. And you're made in my image. You're sacred human beings and you're made in my image. And then God showed the Israelites how to live according to their God-given nature. God basically says, okay, I work and so you also shall work. But I also rest, and so you also should rest. Now, I can relate to what I'm going to share with you momentarily. Imagine generation after generation of people working all day, every day, without ever taking a day off. Do you think that they would have been hardwired to rest? Do you think it would have been easy for them to sit at home in their lazy boy and put their feet up for a day? No. The Israelites would have been hardwired activists because they'd spent so long without a rest. It would have felt unnatural for them to do nothing after so many generations of being slaves to Pharaoh. And so God lovingly helps them out. God lovingly helps them out by making Sabbath keeping one of his 10 commandments. You can read about the 10 commandments in Exodus chapter 20 in your Bibles at home today. But this week, while reading the book that we've been using for this series, the book that goes along with this series, I discovered something brand new. If you look at the list of the 10 commandments, I'll just open to Exodus 20. If you look at the list of 10 commandments here, you'll discover that the longest and most detailed of the 10 commandments is the fourth, which is the commandment that deals with Sabbath keeping. I'll read it for you. The fourth commandment. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Work 6 days and do everything you need to do. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to God, your God. Don't do any work, not you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your servant, nor your maids, nor your animals, not even the foreign guest visiting your town. I'm going to stop there for a second because I think there's a contrast that's screaming out at us. You've got Pharaoh, and he's the king, and he's got commands, and I'm sure his commands were biased to the Egyptians and giving them rest once in a while. But if you were a slave, a servant, a maid, an animal, or a foreign guest, you were building pyramids 7 days a week without ever having a day off. And here we have God who's giving a command, the Creator God, who is the King of Kings, and he's saying, what I am giving you is not just for my people, it's for servants and maids, animals, and foreigners who are in your midst. You can't take advantage of anyone. This gift is for every sacred human being made in my image and then some. Continuing with the 10 commandments on this fourth commandment. For in 6 days God made heaven and earth and sea and everything in them. He rested on the seventh day. Therefore God blessed the Sabbath day. He set it apart as a holy day. Now you look at your list of the 10 commandments and you'll discover, as I did this week, that no commandment is that long or has that much detail attached to it. And that's a significant thing. It's almost like God is saying, listen, Sabbath keeping may feel awkward for you. But as a fish is created to live in water, I created you to rest 24 hours at least every 7 days. And so, you need to discipline yourself to keep Sabbath. You need to train yourself to keep Sabbath if you ever hope to experience this full and rich life that I created for you. So God is speaking, and it's all love. And I don't think there was ever a time when Sabbath keeping is as difficult as it is today. I mean, because of electricity, we can work long after the sun goes down. We can start long before the sun comes up. Because of a BlackBerry or the internet, we can just about work anywhere, anytime. More and more stores are open 24/7, 365. Indeed, I would say by our culture's standards, Sabbath is inefficient, useless, in fact, an unnecessary distraction.